Hey everybody, welcome to today's episode. We are going to be making the perfect hamburger. I'm glad you could join me. Now, wait a minute. I know what you're thinking. How can you make such a claim when burgers are so subjective? You're going to have to trust me on this one. A burger is so much more than bread and meat. It's a complex series of steps that start from the cow and end on a plate. And we're going to nail each one of those steps today. Maximum flavor, maximum juiciness, maximum tenderness, inside of a housing that's going to absolutely blow your mind. I've got a confession to make. I love hamburgers. You know what? Enough talking. Let's make the perfect hamburger.
To get started, we're going to pay a visit to our local butcher. They just got a shipment in today, and I'm going to have them cut some specific cuts for this epic hamburger. One of those cuts is the chuck roast and the chuck rib. That's the meat on the front shoulder of the cow. And we're also going to be using a few cuts that deliver a rich, beefy flavor. The eye of round and the brisket. Amazing. We're also going to be adding 25% fat to the recipe for a couple reasons. Number one, fat equals flavor. This is really going to enhance our burger experience. It's going to make it super juicy and incredibly delicious, but also because we're using 100% grass-fed beef, and our beef is incredibly lean. And you'll see what I'm talking about when we cut into our chuck, because chuck normally has a natural 80-20 balance, but ours is probably about a 95-5. It's super lean. So let's go ahead and cut up our brisket, and then we'll move on to the chuck roast. So let me just interject here. I love grinding my own meat for burgers and other recipes. Grinding your own meat, albeit a little more work, gives you so much more control over your end product. You get to control what goes in it. You get to control the grind, depending on what you're making. And I'll tell you right now, you'll be exponentially happier with your final product if you do it yourself. So when we make ground meat, we normally do 40-50 pounds. This is what it looks like. I've got my chuck. I've got my eye of round, my brisket. There's my fat. And what I want to do is I want to cool it down a little bit. So I'm going to put it in my blast chiller for about 20 minutes or so. You could place this into your freezer for about 45 minutes. This is going to bring the temperature down. It's going to preserve the integrity of your fat and your meat when you're grinding it. And my first grind is going to be on a coarse plate. So this is going to be like a chili grind, nothing too special right here. We're just going to run it through that coarse plate and then go ahead and get ready for the second grind. Now this is where things get interesting. Here we focus on texture, and I'm going to be using a 100mm casing. This is totally optional, and you can see what I'm going to do here in a second, but you'll understand why in a minute. So as that casing is hydrating, I'm going to go ahead and put a 6mm plate onto my grinder, and then I'm going to put a funnel on it. So what's going to happen is we're going to be grinding our meat, and as it's coming out of the grinder, we're going to be using this to stuff that casing. And here's the reason why. Cutting a steak with the grain is going to produce a chewier steak, but if you cut the steak against the grain, you're going to have a more tender bite. I'm going to apply that same principle to hamburgers. As we are stuffing that casing, the grain, in essence, is going to be horizontal. So it's going to be going from left to right. And when we cut our burgers off of this particular mold, the grain of our meat will now be going vertical, which means every bite that we take is going to have an against the grain cut, which is going to produce a more tender hamburger. The other benefit of using this particular casing is that my patties are already formed. So we're going to take this and pop it in the freezer while we make our hamburger buns. A good hamburger bun is almost just as important as a good burger patty. I want it to be slightly sweet. I want it to be buttery. I don't want it to be too thick. I want it to be soft, but yet at the same time, I want it to have some texture. So we're going to add all of our ingredients. And this is just flour, butter, salt, sugar, yeast, water, eggs, and we're going to go ahead and knead that. Once it's done kneading, it's going to double in size. And then I'm going to form my buns. To form the buns, I'm going to take the portions that I cut off, and I just cut off 90-gram little balls of dough right here. I'm going to pinch everything to the center like I'm making a dumpling, just like that. And then I'm going to take that pinched area, put it face down on the table. Notice my table's not floured. I want that surface resistance. It's going to help me form a better ball. And with the cup of my hand, I'm just going to roll it around until I get a nice, firm dough ball. It's going to look just like that. And then I'm going to set that to the side on my tray until I get the rest of them done. Once we form our dough balls, and we want to work rather quickly because they are going to want to continue to rise. That yeast is very active in this recipe. We're going to want to flatten those out with the palm of our hand. And we're just going to flatten them up 3-inch discs. That's what I'm looking for. You can make yours bigger, you can make yours smaller, but once we have that achieved, we're going to cover it with some cling film and let it rise for about 20 minutes. And we're just looking for them to puff up a little bit. This is what it's going to look like after about 20 minutes. Once that's finished, we're going to add some color and texture to these buns. So we're going to brush on an egg wash. That's going to give us some beautiful color. And then we're going to come back with some sesame seeds. Now, those sesame seeds are going to give us a nice nutty flavor. They're going to be slightly toasted, and it's going to give us wonderful texture to what's going to be a very soft, buttery hamburger bun. It's going to be incredible. This is what they're going to look like as we prepare them for the oven. And we're just going to bake these until they're firm, roughly about 17, 18 minutes, 375 degrees, because they're this size. If they're a little bit smaller, you're going to bake them a little less, just by a few minutes. But after about 18 minutes, our buns are now finished. That egg wash provided a beautiful glue for the sesame seeds, but we're not done yet. We're going to come back with some melted butter. They're piping hot. That melted butter is going to really soften up the outside of this, giving it just a wonderful buttery flavor. And once we get that completely coated, this is what our finished hamburger buns are going to look like. Oh my gosh. Let's set that to the side. Let's pull the meat out of the freezer. That's firmed up quite a bit. And all we're going to do here is slice our burger patties. Now, I personally like about a 6-ounce patty. I think that's the perfect size. You know, you could go bigger. The 8 ounces is pretty popular as well. It's up to you. But notice our patties are already formed. We don't have to do a whole lot to them. And what's most important is that the direction of our grain is vertical. And so every single bite is going to be a bite against the grain. Let me show you what one of these patties look like. All we're going to do is remove that outer casing. My patty is basically formed. I'm just going to tighten it up a little bit. And here we go. This is the star of today's episode. This next step is totally optional, but it does add a nice salty, smoky element to your burger. We're going to be making a bacon weave, and I'm just placing that on a baking tray, covering it with another baking tray, and we're going to bake this in the oven, 350 degrees, for about 30 minutes, 35 minutes. After 30 or 35 minutes, or until your bacon weave has crisped up. Notice I've already cut mine into quadrants. We have now our bacon portions for each burger. We're going to let that firm up on this drying tray as we go ahead and cook these hamburgers. I'm going to season these burgers just before I put them on the grill with a little salt and a little pepper. Once I got them on a blazing hot cast iron skillet, I'm going to give them a nice smash. That's going to give me a bonus charring, sort of Maillard reaction flavor. And I'm going to cook them for about 3 minutes on each side. I'm only going to flip these burgers one time. With about 45 seconds left to go, I'm going to put a dab of butter on each one of these, top it with some cheese. Now, the cheese is completely up to you. You could do provolone, Swiss, American, it really doesn't matter. But I don't want to really melt the cheese on the grill because I don't want to waste the cheese. I just want to soften it. So I'm going to put a double stack of cheese here. Once I soften it, I'm going to go ahead and remove it. My burger is now finished, and set that into the oven on warm while I prepare my buns. I've got some buttery buns. Nice buttery soft topping. And while that burger is in the oven, that cheese is going to finish melting. Our buns are toasting. Let's look at our ingredients. I've got lettuce, red onions, pickles, tomatoes, nothing too complicated. And don't get me wrong, I love avocados, I love eggs, but for today's burger, we're going to keep it simple. Our burgers just came out of the oven. Look at that cheese, perfectly melted. We're going to be able to retain all of it. Let's build our epic hamburger. So we're going to start with a little mayo and a little mustard. Actually, a little more mustard. I'm going to put that burger patty right on the bottom, take my bacon weave, and set it on top of that patty. And at this point, we're just going to go ahead and layer it. Notice the thickness of my tomatoes. I don't want to overwhelm the burger with vegetables. I just want to accent the burger. Nice thinly cut pickles, red onions, going to go right on top. And then we're going to finish it with a little bit of lettuce And I'm using some butterhead lettuce and a red variety called Loyo Rosso, which is going to add a wonderful texture. And there you have it. That's how you make a perfect hamburger. Wow. I really wish you could taste this. Flavorful, juicy, tender, magnificently constructed. And the bun, oh, what a great housing for this hamburger. I think I'm going to have to sign off early today because I have a burger waiting for me. Thank you for watching. If you're new to our channel, we'd like to say welcome. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. And if you want to see more of this kind of content, be sure to subscribe to our channel. We post videos each week. We'll see you in the next one.